The night I shouldn't have stayed behind, I never believed in horror stories. Ghosts, demons, curses, those things belong to movies. 2 pages of old books read in candlelight. At least, that's what I used to tell myself. But what happened that night changed me forever. I still remember every detail as if it's carved into my skin, as if the night itself branded me for life. It began in the old college auditorium. The building was ancient, a leftover from the early 1900s. Everyone avoided it except when we had to use it for plays or events. The walls carried the smell of mold and dust, and the seats creaked like bones settling in their graves. That evening, I was part of a small drama group preparing for a performance. After rehearsal ended, everyone left in a hurry. It was raining outside, and no one wanted to linger in a place that already felt haunted even in broad daylight, but I stayed behind. My professor had asked me to help gather some props and costumes from the storage room backstage. I didn't mind at first. The thought of being alone in that massive, empty auditorium didn't scare me, at least, not until the silence swallowed me whole. The rain tapped faintly against the cracked windows high above. My footsteps echoed too loudly as I crossed the wooden stage. The storage room was at the very back, down a long hallway painted with peeling white paint. The dim yellow bulbs flickered overhead, and one went out with a small pop, plunging half the hallway into darkness. My stomach tightened. I told myself not to be ridiculous. It's just an old building, nothing more. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Inside the storage room, the air was damp and suffocating. Costumes hung limply on metal racks like dead bodies waiting to be claimed. The props were scattered fake swords, plastic skulls, old lanterns that hadn't worked in years. I pushed through, grabbing what I needed, stacking them clumsily in my arms. That's when I heard it. A whisper. At first, I thought it was the rain or the building settling. But no, it was distinct. A soft murmur, like a voice carried through water. I froze, straining my ears. Don't. The word was barely audible, but I heard it. I swear I did. My chest tightened, and I spun around, scanning the room. Nothing. Just rows of costumes swaying slightly, though the air was still. I shook my head, forcing out a laugh. I'm imagining things, I whispered to myself, but even my own voice sounded foreign, too loud in the stillness. Hurried out with the props, trying to push the unease down. But as I walked through the hallway again, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. A shadow darted across the far end of the hall, disappearing into the wall as though it never existed. My legs trembled. I wanted to run, but the load in my arms slowed me down. Every creak of the floor, every hum of the lights above felt amplified, chasing me toward the stage. When I reached the auditorium again, the entire place looked darker than before. The rain outside had stopped, leaving the silence almost unbearable. I placed the props on a chair and stood still, waiting for my heartbeat to slow. Then I heard the whisper again, clearer this time. Leave. It came from the stage curtains behind me. My blood ran cold. Slowly, I turned my head toward the heavy velvet drapes. They were still, no breeze, no movement, and yet something inside me screamed that I wasn't alone. I tried to convince myself to walk out, just go home, forget everything. But instead, like a fool, I found myself stepping closer to the curtains. Each step echoed against the empty hall, and the smell of dust grew stronger. When I finally reached them, I lifted the edge of the curtain with a shaky hand. My breath caught in my throat. There was nothing, just darkness swallowing the backstage area. Nothing moved, nothing whispered. Relief almost made me laugh, but then, before I could lower the curtain, I felt it. A hand, cold, pressing lightly against my back. I spun around instantly, my heart slamming against my ribs, but no one was there. The auditorium stretched out in silence, every seat empty, every shadow still. Yet the sensation of that icy touch lingered, crawling up my spine like a warning. That was the first moment I realized Da should have never stayed behind that night. Whispers in the dark hallway, I couldn't breathe properly after that moment. The chill from that invisible hand stayed on my skin, as if it had left an imprint. I wanted to run, scream, anything but my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Still, I forced myself to move, each step heavy, as though the air itself had thickened. I told myself to calm down, that my imagination was making things worse. After all, I had always rolled my eyes when people spoke about ghostly encounters. But the problem was, I knew what I felt. That cold touch was real. It's too real. I thought about leaving the props behind, abandoning everything and just getting out. The front doors of the auditorium weren't far, just a straight dash down the center aisle. I kept my eyes locked on them as if they were the only safe thing in the world. But just as I started moving, the sound came again. A whisper, closer than before. Don't go. This time it was right by my ear. I froze mid-step, nearly dropping the props from earlier still clutched in my hands. My skin prickled, and my eyes darted around desperately. The seats were empty. The stage was bare. The shadows hadn't shifted, yet the voice had been unmistakable, as though someone leaned in close, their lips brushing against my ear. My breath turned shallow. I bolted, sprinting down the aisle toward the doors. My footsteps echoed wildly, too loud, bouncing off the walls, like 100 versions of myself were running with me. When I reached the heavy wooden doors, I yanked the handle, didn't move. I twisted it again, harder this time. Nothing. Locked. No, 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 I whispered, panic surging through me. Those doors were never locked during rehearsals. Never. A loud thud echoed from the stage behind me. My head snapped back. One of the metal chairs had toppled over, even though I had stacked them neatly just minutes ago. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I backed away from the door, keeping my eyes on the stage. Something was wrong with the shadows. They seemed to ripple, stretching unnaturally along the floor. It was as if the light itself was bending, creating shapes where none should exist. Then, a figure stepped out from behind the curtain. My mouth went dry. It wasn't fully solid, more like smoke. Darkness pulled together into the shape of a person. It's tall, faceless, its head tilted slightly as if studying me. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice trembling. "Stay away from me." The figure didn't answer. Instead, it moved closer, gliding across the stage without sound, without weight. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but the locked door held me prisoner. I turned toward the side exit, the one leading back through the hallway to the backstage storage. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't locked. I forced my legs to move, sprinting toward it. Behind me, the whisper returned, though this time it was layered, as if multiple voices spoke at once. "Stay with us." I didn't look back. I couldn't. My hands fumbled with the cold metal handle of the side door, and relief flooded me when it gave way. I shoved it open and stumbled into the hallway, slamming it shut behind me. The hallway lights flickered violently, buzzing as though they were straining to stay alive. My footsteps echoed as I ran, not daring to slow down. Every shadow seemed to lurch toward me, reaching out, clawing at my sides. Then, halfway down the hall, I stopped. Someone was standing at the other end, not the smoky figure from the stage. This was clearer. A girl, maybe my age, dressed in an old-fashioned white dress that brushed the floor. Her hair was long and tangled, hiding most of her face. She wasn't moving, just standing there, waiting. My throat tightened. "Hello." I managed to croak, though my voice shook. The girl tilted her head slowly, strands of hair falling away to reveal one pale eye staring directly at me, and then in the faintest voice she whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Before I could respond, the lights above me went out all at once. Darkness swallowed me whole. The face behind the door, when the lights went out, I couldn't even hear myself breathe. The hallway was swallowed in total darkness, the kind that made you forget what light ever felt like. For a moment, I stood frozen, too afraid to move. The silence pressed against my ears until every tiny sound, the drip of water, the hum of dying wires, felt unbearable. And then, footsteps. Soft, deliberate, echoing from the end of the hallway. My chest tightened. I wasn't sure if it was the girl I had seen, or something else. Every instinct begged me not to move, not to draw attention to myself. But standing there felt worse, as if the darkness itself was pushing me toward madness. Slowly, I stretched my hand out along the wall, feeling my way forward. My fingers brushed over peeling paint, then cold metal and old utility door I had never paid attention to before. My heart hammered. If I could just slip inside, maybe I could hide until this nightmare ended. I gripped the knob with trembling hands and pushed. To my shock, it creaked open, as the air inside was staler, colder. I slipped in quickly, shutting the door behind me. For a second, I thought I was safe. My shoulders sagged with relief, and I let out a shaky exhale. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. At first, I only sensed an oppressive weight in the room, a feeling like I had stepped into someone else's lungs. I forced my eyes to adjust to the faint glow seeping in through the cracks of the door. Slowly, shapes emerged. Shelves lined with cleaning supplies, mops propped in the corner, buckets stacked carelessly. It looked like an old janitor's closet. But then, in the far corner, I saw it. A face. Not fully formed, more like a pale blur at first, hovering in the shadows. But the longer I stared, the clearer it became. Hollow eyes, blacker than the darkness itself. A mouth stretched far too wide, grinning at me with teeth that didn't look human. I stumbled back, hitting the shelf behind me. Bottles rattled, one falling and shattering at my feet. The sound pierced the silence like a gunshot. The face tilted. Then, with a jerking movement, it began to crawl forward. Not walk crawl. Its limbs bent at impossible angles, elbows and knees cracking as it scuttled across the floor like an insect wearing human skin. I couldn't even scream, my throat locked tight, air refusing to leave my lungs. It was almost on me when instinct finally took over. I lunged for the door, yanking it open so hard it slammed against the wall. The hallway outside was still dark, but anything was better than that room. I bolted, not caring where I ended up, just needing distance between me and that thing. The whispers followed me. Don't leave us. Don't leave us. Their voices overlapped, some angry, some pleading, all clawing at my sanity. My legs burned as I ran blindly through the pitch-black hall, hands outstretched to feel my way. Then suddenly light, faint glow spilled from one of the dressing rooms ahead. I didn't think. I sprinted toward it, slamming the door behind me once I crossed the threshold. The glow came from a single bulb dangling above a cracked mirror. My reflection stared back at me, pale, drenched in sweat, eyes wide with terror. For a moment, it was almost comforting to see something familiar, until my reflection moved. I hadn't. My body was still frozen in front of the mirror, but in the glass, my reflection tilted its head slowly, just like the girl had done earlier. Then its lips curled into a grin I knew I wasn't making, stumbled back, knocking into the makeup table. My reflection leaned closer to the glass, pressing its hands against it, palms flat, as if trying to push through. The bulb above flickered violently and I heard it again, the whisper. But this time it came from my own reflection. Stay. Trade places with me. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned toward the door, but before I could grab the handle, the glass cracked. Thin spiderweb fractures spread across the mirror, but the reflection didn't shatter it, only grinned wider, its eyes dark hollows. The cracks spread faster. Pieces began to fall. And then, with a deafening snap, the mirror burst outward. I covered my face, but not before seeing something pale and thin crawl out of the glass. It wasn't me. It wasn't human. And it was free. Trapped between reality and terror, the sound of the mirror shattering still rang in my ears as the thing crawled out, dragging itself onto the dressing room floor. Its limbs were impossibly thin, like sticks covered in damp skin, joints bending backward as it moved. I stumbled into the far corner, but the small room left me nowhere to run. Its head jerked toward me, snapping into place with a sickening crack. The face it wore was mine or almost mine. But it was wrong. The eyes were darker, hollow, and the smile stretched unnaturally wide, splitting across its cheeks. For the first time since the night began, I screamed. The sound tore from my throat, raw and desperate, but the creature only mimicked me. Its scream echoed mine, distorted, louder, shaking the walls as though the building itself was howling. My knees buckled. I dropped to the floor, covering my ears. "Stop, please, stop," I cried out, and just like that, silence. When I dared to look up, it was standing perfectly still, its head tilted in that same unnerving way, eyes locked on me. Then, slowly, it raised a hand and pointed toward the door. I didn't wait to question why. I bolted past it, shoving the door open so hard it slammed into the wall. My shoulder throbbed, but I didn't stop. I sprinted into the hallway, chest heaving, eyes darting everywhere for an exit. But the building wasn't the same anymore. The hallway stretched endlessly, longer than it should have been. The familiar doors were gone, replaced by rows of identical blank ones. The air was thick, damp, and every step I took echoed strangely, as if I were running in circles. Panic clawed at me. I banged on the nearest door, then another, then another. All locked, all silent. My breath came out in harsh gasps, tears stinging my eyes. I was trapped, caught between walls that twisted reality itself. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Not running, slow, measured. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to keep moving. But no matter how fast I ran, the footsteps stayed close, always just behind me. Finally, my legs gave out. I collapsed to my knees, sobbing, fists pounding against the floor. Why me? What do you want from me? The whispers answered. Stay with us forever. Their voices came from everywhere, bouncing off the walls, bleeding into my head. I clutched my temples, screaming, but the voices only grew louder. Faces flickered in the shadows around me, dozens of them, pale, hollow-eyed, twisted into screams and grins. I stumbled to my feet and grabbed another door handle. This one turned. My heart leapt as I shoved the door open, tumbling into another room. It was the stage. But it wasn't the same stage I had left behind earlier. The auditorium was filled now, every seat occupied. Rows upon rows of figures sat silently, staring at me. Their faces were blurred, indistinct, like smudges of ash, but their eyes glowed faintly in the dark. I froze in the center of the stage. My skin crawled as all those eyes followed me, unblinking. Then, slowly, in perfect unison, they raised their hands and began to clap. The sound was deafening. Thunderous applause that shook the floorboards beneath my feet. I backed away, trembling. This isn't real. This isn't real. I shouted, but my voice was drowned out by the horrific ovation. Then, one by one, they began to rise from their seats. The applause turned into a chorus of distorted laughter, high-pitched and inhuman. The figures stepped into the aisles, moving toward the stage, toward me. Their bodies twitched with unnatural spasms, their limbs bending in ways that made my stomach turn. I spun around, searching for an escape, and saw the heavy red curtain. It swayed, though there was no wind, beckoning me. With no other choice, I ran for it. The moment I pushed past the curtain, the laughter ceased. I found myself backstage again, standing in complete silence. My chest heaved, every muscle screaming with exhaustion, but the stillness didn't comfort me. In fact, it felt worse, like the silence before a predator pounced. And then I saw it, a mirror. A tall, cracked mirror leaning against the wall. And in it, my reflection wasn't mimicking me this time. It was smiling, and it whispered, clear as day. You can't escape. You're already one of us. The final scream that wasn't mine, I stared at the mirror, at the version of me that wasn't me. Its smile was wide, splitting unnaturally across its face, showing teeth far too sharp, far too many. My chest heaved, but my reflection looked calm, almost gleeful, as if it had been waiting for this moment. I shook my head violently. You're not real, you're not me. But the reflection chuckled a sound that crawled down my spine like a colony of insects. The crack in the glass spread wider, jagged lines cutting across the surface until the mirror looked like a spider's web. Yet the image within it didn't distort. My reflection was whole, untouched by the damage, staring at me with eyes that no longer belonged to me. Then it spoke again, its voice low and guttural. You're already inside. The air thickened, pressing against my lungs. I backed away, but the room seemed to shrink. The walls drew closer, the floor groaning beneath me. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it would split my chest open. And then the lights went out. The darkness wasn't just absence, it was alive. I could feel it shifting, moving, brushing against my skin like unseen fingers. Whispers filled the void, hundreds of them overlapping. Some laughed, some cried, some screamed, but they all said the same thing. Stay, stay. I screamed, thrashing, clawing at the air, trying to push the voices away. But in the blackness, hands grabbed me. Cold skeletal hands, yanking at my arms, my legs, my throat. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And then light. A spotlight beamed down on me. I blinked against the sudden brightness, gasping for air. When my vision cleared, I realized where I was. The stage. But this time it wasn't empty. The seats in the auditorium were filled again, every shadowy figure staring at me. They weren't clapping now. They were waiting, silent, expectant. I looked down and realized my hands were bound in invisible restraints, my body forced into position at the center of the stage. The heavy red curtain drew back slowly, and I felt a crushing dread settle over me. This was a performance, and I was the show. My reflection appeared then, stepping out from the wings. But it wasn't confined to glass. Anymore, it was solid, real, every detail of me replicated, except for that monstrous grin and those void-like eyes. It moved gracefully, confidently, while I trembled, helpless. The crowd leaned forward as if savoring the moment. My reflection raised its hand and I felt my throat tighten. My lips moved, but not by my choice. A scream tore from my mouth, high and piercing, shaking the rafters. But it wasn't my scream. It was something else's, inhuman, guttural, laced with agony and laughter all at once. My voice had been stolen, twisted into a sound I didn't recognize. The audience erupted, their clapping and laughter merging into a thunderous roar. My reflection bowed deeply, then turned its head toward me. Its smile widened as it whispered only for me to hear, "You're mine now." And then with one swift motion it stepped into me. The world blinked. I found myself standing tall, smiling, the restraints gone. The audience applauded wildly, rising to their feet in celebration. My body moved fluidly, bowing with elegance. Ow! But inside, I was screaming, because I wasn't the one in control anymore. I was buried deep, trapped behind my own eyes, watching as the thing wore my skin, my face, my life. My hands moved without my will. My lips curved into a grin I didn't command. The curtain fell. The show was over. And so was I somewhere in the dark. I could still hear my own scream echoing. But it wasn't mine anymore.